Do you want to see how I made this sign for my friend's wedding? Sick, because I'm gonna tell you. And so obviously with a project like this, the starting point is gonna be really important. For me, where I personally like to start is by being in just way over my head. I do not have the skills, the background, or even the tools necessary to complete this project. But what I do have is a can-do attitude and like a very real sense of delusion. And that usually carries me through these kind of things. And so once you have that really, really strong starting point, the next step for me personally is to procrastinate. So I'll usually spend about 2/3 of the time that I have to do one of these projects just obsessing over it and thinking about the details and how I probably can't do it and I'm probably going to screw it up. So then finally, once I'm done procrastinating, the only option is to succeed. I do not have any time for failure. And actually, I'm in this step right now. I haven't actually made the sign yet. I have all the supplies. I'm just doing this to put off doing that. So we're gonna find out if it works together. Future Allie here to confirm that it did in fact work, which is why we are all gathered here today. Yay! So without further ado, step 1, design the sign and gather supplies. I was working off of this very detailed and thought out sketch, so the supplies I needed were based on that. It could vary a little depending on what you want your sign to look like, but in the end, this is the list of supplies that I needed. Some of which I had, some of which I just got for this. Side note, please give me project ideas that I can use a jigsaw for because I bought it just for this project and would like to use it for other things to bring down the cost per project. So let me know. Also, another note is to make sure that your nails and screws are long enough to go through the pieces of wood that you get. Mine were for the most part, but we ran into a few issues in the end, so keep an eye out for that. My boyfriend came to the store with me to assist in gathering my supplies so that I didn't have to look confused until someone helped me. Instead, we both just looked confused until someone helped us together. And in the end, it all worked out, which meant time for step 2. Assembly and painting. I will say the way I did this is different from the way that I'd recommend you do it. First, I assembled the A-frame by laying out the thicker boards, measuring to make sure they were even, and then drilling the hinges into place. Mind you, prior to this, my specific skill set in this area was primarily putting together a few successful IKEA cube shelves and breaking one, but that's less important. But once the A-frame was set up, I moved on to setting up the front pocket piece. To do this, I drew an estimate of what I wanted the front cutout to look like. Once I figured it was good enough, I got to work with the jigsaw. One thing I will say here is you'll get a cleaner front side if you cut through the back, because it does splinter a bit on top of the plywood. But I didn't know this, so I also, after cutting it out, I went in with some wood filler and sandpaper to try to even it out a bit, which also worked out well with fixing up some other imperfections in the wood, but I also ended up really rounding out the front edges where I cut the plywood, which I liked the look of a lot anyway. After that was all set, I used a hammer and nails to attach the 1" by 2" pieces to the front piece of plywood to make it more of a pocket. I used nails because I figured they'd be easier to cover with the paint from the front side. And with the A-frame and front pocket piece together, I got to painting. I wanted to go for a lime wash sort of look, so I got a paint tray and split the 2 colors that I was using, and then would dip my brush half into each and paint from there. What I would do differently would be to paint the pieces of wood I used for the A-frame before putting the hinges on, which looking back feels obvious, but hindsight and all that crap. I had to maneuver a bit to get to the underside since it was already screwed together, but it wasn't too bad, just sort of a silly pain and a little bit messy. But once that was all done and dry, it was time to paint on the words. So I used a ruler to measure out where I wanted them to go, just to make sure they'd be straight and the spacing was all right. And then I freehanded them based on some fonts I used to mock it up, and we played with the thickness a little bit to get to where it ended up to make sure that it was nice and visible. Once that was dry, it was almost ready. I had my boyfriend help me out with the next step because I wasn't entirely confident in my ability to screw the pocket on straight since we had to screw it through the back. But he just lined it up and went right through. And just like that, she was standing. So finally, we're at step 3,
flower time. Keep in mind here that this is DIY and I am not a professional and was just worried about how it looked. Since the sign was so big and the front pocket was so deep, I figured it would be a waste to fill it all the way up with the floral foam. Honestly, the structurally sound way to do this probably would have been to screw in some more of the 1x2 pieces to the A-frame to act as shelves for the floral foam, but I just thought of that right now, so I didn't do that. I just threw some tape onto the floral foam and hoped it would stick, which it did. I just tried to place it low enough that it wasn't too visible, but high enough that the flowers wouldn't be covered because fake flowers are expensive. So once the floral foam was in place and seemingly secure, I started cutting off the stems of the flowers and just placing them wherever it felt right. I started with some more hanging pieces because I thought they could cover anywhere that the foam is visible and any space that felt a little bit too open. Then I just started filling her up. And I just went till it felt right. I did, however, spend 2 days questioning if it was too crowded or if it looked good, but in the end, I do really like how it turned out. And here she is. Honestly, in the end, it turned out to be easier than I expected because I do tend to catastrophize things. But to be fair, I am also a DIY girly at heart, so take your own skill set and abilities into consideration if you do decide to embark on a similar project. Let me know what you think. And if you have any questions, leave them below as well, and I could try to answer to the best of my ability. And thanks for being here.